Well, these tool series are kind of special presentations as we dive into two categories because with defense, there was some feedback about the defense article. We'll get to that shortly. And we're going to focus on the best fastballs in the Tiger system. So there's a lot. And so we haven't done a podcast or a video in a while since before the Rule 5 draft. So the defense one was pretty much set. Then the Cubs took Gage Workman and the Marlins picked Liam Hicks second overall, which still boggles my mind. Not because nothing against Liam Hicks. It's just never saw that coming.
Well, it's tough for hitters to stick after they've been taking the Rule 5, and there were only 4 of them taken, and 2 of them came from the Tiger system.
Yeah.
And not, and I think we speculated that Workman might go because he has a lot of secondary skills that could be very helpful if you're on the end of the roster. I thought Hicks might get protected by the Tigers just because they traded for him, and they only have 2 catchers on the 40-man roster, but they didn't. And I was kind of shocked that he was taken second overall. But I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what he does. Good luck to him if he sticks. That's a good opportunity.
Absolutely. And also Jack Anderson was also picked up, and another catcher by the name that we've had on the interview from the show, Josh Crouch by the Angels, I believe it was.
Angels took Josh Crouch. Red Sox took Jack Anderson. I don't remember who took Sadrack Franco, and one other player went. And
the Ezekiel or
Iker Weezy.
Weezy went by San Diego, I believe. Yeah, San Diego. Right. Yeah,
and Weezy would have probably been on my on the fastball list had he not been taken.
Yes. So let's start with the fastball list. We'll start. You want to go top to bottom, Chris, or you want to go 5 to? How do you want?
I'll go top to bottom because it's not like some big mystery. I mean, one of the fun things for me is I don't know the way it is now. It used to, back in the day, it used to be just like, all right, well, who throws the hardest, and that's your best fastball, and I think everybody knew, like, okay, there were always guys who threw like upper 90s but got hit harder than you'd expect, and but now we just have all the information available to know why certain fastballs play better than others. It used to be super frustrating to watch Chris Young throw like 88 to 90 and get strikeouts at the top of the zone, and now we know there's spin rate is involved and induced vertical break and vertical approach angle and seam shifted wake and all these modern terms. And so when you go through the system, you can find interesting fastballs in every category. Like there are guys I didn't mention who, like Blake Pivaroff, throws like 91, but he's got a 2,600 RPM fastball. Like there's interesting things in there. So it was just kind of, I tried to put all that together and come up with the best fastballs and combined with our general scouting of these guys, right? Because some of it, you can look at the numbers all day long in the production, but you also have to project how it's going to work in the big leagues. And so that's kind of the thought process behind there. And, surprise, surprise, number 1 is Jackson Jobe, who has, he's generally considered the best pitching prospect in baseball. Until Roki Sasaki signs somewhere or, Andrew Painter comes back or Jobe exhausts his prospect eligibility. But, I mean, we've seen him make the improvements. His fastball was a question mark when he came into pro ball, and he added velocity to it. It's now 96 to 98 regularly. He added spin and shape to it, which is unusual. And so now, it's got just about everything. It's like you said, it's 96, 98, spin rate 2,400 up to 2,600 at times, 17 to 20 inches of induced vertical break, just about everything you want out of the fastball. The only thing, he doesn't get a ton of swings and misses with it. We've talked about this before. I don't know exactly why that is. Maybe it's because of he's kind of a below average extension, if you will. So the fastball maybe doesn't play as hard as it looks. And also it might just be small things with his command that he needs to clean up. But the main thing for me is, he's got all these metrics that point to it being a great fastball, and there's still like room to grow, I think. So it seemed like a pretty obvious number 1 to me.
Yeah, especially when you look at the fact that he did kind of hit a roadblock a little bit in Erie, where it wasn't, you can say the umpire squeezed him a little bit too, but it was maybe perhaps of a little bit of adjustment. And then he was cruising along. I mean, he started the season strong, then he had an injury. Then, like I said, just kind of almost hit a roadblock. But I think it was also, I like to think, and probably there's evidence to support this too, that it was just kind of, Tigers asked him to do something and to work on, basically, it was better command. And I know Scott Harris, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but Harris mentioned that they wanted to see more command and the ability to kind of not just rely on two pitches, but the fastball command was probably a big part of it.
Yeah, and I think to a certain extent, it was also probably just wanting him to get innings. Like it's got to be super frustrating to. I don't know if anybody's ever played like MLB The Show and done a creative player, and you feel like you're like, oh, I want to get to the big leagues, and you're just stuck in Double A for like third straight season. It's got to be frustrating as a real player to feel like, oh, I've got the stuff. You need to build up the innings because they're going to want you for more next year, and they don't want you to do that in the big leagues. But yeah, he eventually got there. We saw flashes. The interesting thing, and I didn't know what to do. If you search at Baseball Savant, it breaks down fastballs into four-seamers, sinkers, and cutters. And for me, cutters are kind of like hybrid fastball sliders, really. There are times that some guys throw a cutter that's more like an old school slider, and sometimes, as in Job's case, it really is kind of an old cut fastball. It's like 88 to 92 with really late glove side movement. And so I threw that in there as well, just as a note to say, like, yeah, he's got a really, really good cutter. And oddly enough, his cutter is almost like his safety blanket. I think he locates that really well, like better than any of his other pitches, although the changeup I think is close. So we may see more cutters out of Job going forward until he dials in that four-seam command a little bit more.
Yeah, because the action he gets on the cutter too. I know he's talked about that with, I believe it was Pitching Ninja. I forgot who was talking to about what he's trying to do with his cutter. And there's a really good 3D model that I'm going to show here that I remember. I saved this for this particular reason, but it shows the 3D traction of the action he gets on the cutter, because he gets a lot of swings and misses with it too. Mm-hmm. You saw it when he got called up against, I believe it was against Tampa, where one of his first swings and misses was on the cutter. Mm-hmm. And here's the 3D model I was referring to. The cutter comes in at 96, and look at the action on that, just tailing down, similar to what you see sometimes on a slider.
We say 96 mile an hour cutter.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he was amped up coming out of the bullpen.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, 96 mile an hour cutter is crazy if you got a 101 and that changeup. I don't expect him to be throwing that hard as a starter.
Yeah.
But still, he's throwing plenty hard. So,
but I just wanted to show the difference between that fastball. Like, kind of the fastball has more of a riding up action versus the cutter, where you see that kind of split go down a little bit. Not a splitter, but I mean that kind of a tailing action towards the bottom of the zone.
Yeah, he's got all the shapes you need, right, to attack hitters from both sides of the plate. And the cutter helps him with lefties, so does the changeup. The slider helps him with righties, and so does the fastball. And I was speculating that he may add a two-seamer just to give a different look. It seems like the Tigers love having guys who throw sinkers too, so I think he'll add that down the road.
So, by the way, that 3D thing is really badass. I've always been a fan of, like, just when you can see that demonstration. So number 2 is Troy Melton.
Yeah, and we've seen Troy Melton, I don't know, half dozen times in person, maybe more. I don't know. You were there for his Double A debut. We were there for his High A debut. This is the video that we're watching right now, is his High A debut. And we saw him again a couple times that year. I actually looked, and I don't think we cut up any of his starts this year, oddly enough.
Really?
I think,
I would have sworn that we did.
I thought I would have as well, but he struggled for a lot of the year, and it may have been that he just never really put together one of those starts that felt like it was worthy of putting cutting up. But still, and the results weren't great this year overall, but I still have a lot of faith in his fastball. I think it's his best pitch. You can see it here. He's throwing 96, 97. He's touched 98 with it. It's got some pretty good life. It doesn't jump off the page like Job's, but I think he's got more extension and so I think it plays pretty well. There's a 98 fastball, and I don't know if it's a true plus offering going forward, but he got a 30% whiff rate on it in low A a couple of years ago. I think the Double A hitters didn't have nearly as much trouble, so he's another guy who needs to. We talked about this with Brandon. He needs to refine his command a little bit. He throws a lot of strikes, but sometimes they're in the wrong spot. So he just needs to adjust that a little bit, and I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, and he's aware of that too. Like, when we got a chance to talk to him after his first start too. The guy knows his stuff in terms of just looking at the numbers and the ability to look at what he's doing wrong. And there's going to be a period of adjustment too, especially coming into the Eastern League, where I mean, again, we've talked about this ad nauseum. The Midwest League is a pitcher's league, no doubt. Where there's the Eastern League is a little bit of it's a lot of offense. I mean, you see teams like Somerset, Binghamton just recently, and not to say there's not good pitching or anything. Don't get me wrong, but for him, he gave up a lot of home runs. A lot of pitches were over in the top of the zone, and it just could be him just getting a feel for it. But yeah, command. You're absolutely correct. Command, having the ability to throw that pitch as the fastball to set up your secondaries, of course, is the fundamentals, but also just to get it's tougher it gets tougher as you move up in the system.
Yeah, I mean that's how the minors are structured, right? It's going to get harder at every level. He's a big, strong kid. He's always going to throw hard, I think, unless he suffers a catastrophic injury. So, yeah, I didn't have a ton of other candidates here. Basically, only one other one for the second fastball, and he came in third because of the way the fastball plays. But yeah, Melton's it's a good arm, and he's kind of in that second or third tier of prospects in the system that shouldn't be forgotten about.
Yeah, and I think that because the amount of Double A this year was kind of like a veteran, I don't want to say veteran staff per se, but it was kind of an unproven. It wasn't as prospect heavy. Erie wasn't as prospect heavy as it has been in the last couple of years, so it's kind of easy to forget why Melton's there. But yeah, he made an impression last year and it continues, and I think there'll be some more growth this year as he starts his second season at Erie. Number 3 is Rainer Castillo, and Chris, this is the evolution of Rainer Castillo in 3 months, in just 3 months in the season has been fascinating to watch. We've talked about his sinker numerous times and the heavy feel for it, but the fastball seems like a new revelation.
Yeah, well, he was one of, I think Baseball America had an article, and he was among the minor league leaders in terms of fastball velocity gains. And we've talked about it since the very beginning of the year. It's for such a large kid, it looks incredibly easy for him to throw 95, 97 just consistently. And you're seeing he's got the slider, which is kind of his main strikeout pitch, but he fires four seamers and sinkers, and hitters just cannot lift his sinker. At least they couldn't in Florida State League. He ran into some speed bumps against the more advanced hitters in the Arizona Fall League, but it's a pretty nasty sinker, and he feels like he's only 20. He just turned 20 in June, I think it was. He feels like a guy who could throw even harder down the road, and particularly if he moves to the bullpen, he might be sitting 99. So it's a pretty heavy sinker and a nice fastball to work, start your foundation with.
Yeah, he can jam a lot of hitters with that fastball too, and the ability to change planes like he can with both his pitches, the fastball, the sinker, and yeah, you're right. The slider, it started to become more of a swing and miss stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong. Towards the second half of the year, right? I mean, in the beginning, he wasn't really striking out a lot. It seemed like he was like inconsistent. Not to say inconsistent with strikeouts, but it seemed like the strikeouts picked up towards the second half of the year.
Yeah, I think he ended up with like 6.5 strikeouts per 9, which is not ideal, but it's hard to complain about a guy. He held opposing hitters to under 200 batting average. I put it in the piece. The average launch angle against his sinker was -4 degrees. So you're not running into too much trouble if the average batted ball is going right into the dirt. So yeah, I mean, like I said, that sinker, the fastball is a great foundation for him. As he continues to refine the changeup and the slider, which is a good pitch, I think that the fastballs may get more swings and misses in the future as hitters start gearing up for the better secondary pitches. But it's a big arm and it's a lot of strikes, and that's it. That's a great place to start.
Yeah, especially if he gets to start the season at West Michigan. I mean, there's a possibility too that we more likely by the end of the summer, if he masters high A, we could see him at Erie at some point. Mm-hmm. Number 4 is a guy we're familiar with, the Tiger Minor League Pitcher of the Year, and the Midwest Pitcher of the Year, Jaden Ham, a friend of the show, and this is an example where you're talking about at the top of the video about it does not speed. It's about what you can do in location.
Yeah, and we think that if he throws a little bit harder, he's going to be even more difficult to deal with. But right now, it's fine. His fastball, like I said, it's like 92, 93. He'll touch 95 and flirt with 96 at times. But it's the shape. It's the shape of the pitch, and in conjunction with that breaking ball, it's He's kind of a nearly over the top delivery, arm slot, and the fastball just has a ton of natural carry on it. So you throw that at the top of the zone, and it gets on hitters faster than they realize, and it goes right over the top of their bat. And it's something he did all year long. And like we said, you add another tick of velocity to that, and you're got a really dangerous pitch. So even if you don't, I think it'll still work. And so yeah, we were at the point here in the list where there really just aren't that many starters in the system who are throwing 95 plus regularly. There aren't. So then it becomes okay, which guys whose fastballs play the best, and Jaden Ham I think leads that crop.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked to him too about what he was working on and what have you, and in terms of just the Tigers really didn't have to do much with him out of college too. So that was the really cool piece of information we found out from him. You can find the interview on our interview series on our playlist here on our YouTube channel. But yeah, some of the talking to him about the fastball shape too a little bit, and he really dives into what he kind of like. It's to quote the late great Jim Price, the art of pitching. That's what I mean. I hate is the cliche as it sounds. It's true, and he is pretty good with that.
Yeah, he's throwing his pitches where they work the most, and that was the big thing. And that fastball plays really well up at the top of the zone. You saw that one right there; it just seemed to explode towards the zone.
Yeah.
So yeah, and like I said, there's not an army of really hard throwing starters after that, and I kind of just. I don't want to mean this to be like negative toward Garrett Burhan as number 5, but it was kind of like, all right, well, he's just kind of one of the few guys left. And I think that he's underrated. You don't hear about him much. I still think it's probably a reliever down the line. It reminds me a lot of Alex Faedo, and you'll see in this video, we're talking fastballs, but you'll see in this video some pretty nasty sliders. He set a career high with 11 strikeouts in this game. But yeah, he throws 93, 94 consistently. He'll touch 96. He's got a sinker and a four-seamer. Neither of them have particularly special shape. But as I was saying, like, I think if you throw him out of the bullpen and you have him throwing that slider, I bet you his fastball is sitting at 96, 97 and touching 98 or 99. And I think you might have something there. You just don't hear about him a lot. So I decided to include him. And he's got a decent changeup too. You saw it right there. That he throws a curveball. I don't like the curveball. He can get rid of the curveball. But the slider, the changeup are pretty good. And I think if you get them in shorter stints, the fastball is going to play better too.
Yeah, that curveball can be a little loopy. But Burhan, I mean, I think the one thing you're right. He had I don't want to say low key. Well, yeah, you know what? Screw it. The best way to describe it, Chris, he had a low key year in terms of just he came out of nowhere. Last year was at West Michigan, kind of finding his way, and then he just kind of dominated early on at West Michigan. And like we were looking at some of the starts and just seemed like a completely different pitcher where it was, I want to say he was in pitching the contact before, but it just seemed like he had a lot more command of the strike zone and just able to get some more swing and miss stuff, especially with that slider. That slider was sick, but that sets up that fastball really well.
Yeah, he led the led the minors Tigers minor league system in innings pitched this year. So I like again, it's one of those things. He's got the pitch mix and he's got the durability to be a starter. I just the delivery has always looked kind of relieverish to me, and I just think the stuff might play up better in the bullpen. But who knows? It never hurts to have some more starting depth.
Yeah, especially right now with the Tigers kind of saying that they're not going to sign many more starters. Well, they're not going to sign any starters. It looks like they're done shopping with that. But as far as honorable mentions go, the names on the list: Sawyer Gibson Long, Brant Hurler, Ty Madden, and Gabriel Reyes, who I think go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was originally going to put in parentheses like what about those guys I liked, but I didn't. I felt like whatever, But basically, each one of those guys has something interesting about their profile. For Gibson Long, it's elite extension. It's almost 7.5 feet of extension, which is just 99th percentile. For Brant Hurter, it's the sinker. Like the sinker didn't work terribly well in the minors, but it's got a ton of movement compared to other sinkers at the big league level. At least other sinkers from that relative arm slot. And it worked really well. And for Ty Madden, it's actually not his four-seamer, it's the cutter. And again, I don't know how to classify that as it should be a fastball or breaking ball, but his cutter played pretty well. And for Reyes, it's the shape of his fastball, I think. It really sneaks up on guys. It's pretty similar to another guy on our list in the reliever list.
Yeah, and again, I will say this, and if it wasn't for a rain delay, I really think the Lakeland would have won the Florida State League championship because Reyes was that good on the top. Like he could get a lot of swings and miss on the top of the zone with his fastball. It was really good at changing eye level, and he really, again, another guy like like Burhan, who just really kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah, no, it was a great season for Reyes, and he is one of the underrated players in the system, I think.
So let's move on to relievers, and number one starts with the latest addition to the 40-man roster, Billy Owens, who had a huge postseason and really opened up a lot of eyes coming over in the trade from Texas in the, I believe it was the Carson Kelly deal, or was it
I don't remember if it was the Kelly deal or the Chafin deal, but yeah. I think we should probably just lump those together, like back in the day when the Tigers made the 2 trades with the Angels and they got Wilkel Hernandez and Elvin Rodriguez. Just lump them all together. I kind of went back and forth between 3 guys here at number 1, and I eventually settled on Owens because the velocity is there with just about anybody else. He doesn't live in the upper 90s, but he gets there enough for it to work. And he's more 95, 96, which is still nice. But you see that pitch right there was 98 with cutting action. And he's only 5'10", but he's really got that kind of drop and drive delivery. So he gets good extension, and it's the fastball shape that misses bats. So that's kind of what put it over the edge for me, was the combination of the velocity and then the movement. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, and I think the Tigers, if it was just that, I don't know if they would have added him to the 40-man. He's got other stuff going on for him, but I think the fastball is what carries the profile.
Yeah, good scouting by the Tigers here on getting this guy, because I mean, when the Tigers picked him up, you looked at it as like on paper, just as like, okay, well, it just sounds like just a ho-hum reliever, but watching him pitch in the postseason with that slider and that fastball, but the fastball played up really, really well, and some of the tailing action he was getting on it, and he was missing a lot of bats. And that was one of the things, like just like last year with Tyler Matson and the guy that traded the Brewers. I'm trying to blank.
Blake Holub.
Blake Holub, thank you. Very similar, where Gabe Alvarez rode Owens the same way, just dominant, and he really was the difference maker for Erie to clinch their 2nd championship in a row.
Yeah, no, and so that's he's on the 40-man. We will, I don't know if we'll probably see him at some point this year. You never know, though. It's a guy who hasn't been to AAA yet.
Yeah, and so speaking of, we just mentioned his name, Tyler Matson comes in at number 2, and he spent all of last year recovering from injury. Was it Tommy John, I believe?
Yeah, Tommy John, I think in March. But the Tigers added him to the 40-man as well. Yeah, and he was another one that I initially, I think I had 3rd, and then I bumped him up to 2nd just because. Again, it's not strictly velocity here. He does throw plenty hard, but it's mostly 94, 95, and he'll bump up to 98 at some point. But he has that over-the-top delivery and just an absolute ton of carry on the fastball. It's we were looking at TrackBand data on him, and it's 19, 20, 21 inches of induced vertical break, which is about as much as you'll ever see. And it's consistent, and it's got a ton of spin on it too. So guys, he misses bats, and he gets a lot of pop-ups, and it's a really nice fastball for a back-end reliever. You just need him to. He walked a few too many guys 2 years ago, which is not unusual for power arm relievers, right? And he's coming back from TJ surgery, so control is usually the last thing to come back. So I wouldn't expect him to tear things up this year, but that fastball is going to play in the big league level, I think.
Yeah, especially because the way it comes off last second on the extension, you could definitely see him missing a lot of bats with that, and especially on the bottom part of the zone too, because they had so much tailing action on that fastball.
Yeah, and so like I said, and then I moved through the top 3. I kind of switched him around, and Yosber Sanchez is the hardest thrower in the system, and so I initially had him number 1, but I moved him down because we saw him live in Lansing, I think, and saw him in West Michigan another time, and he had good numbers this year, but the fastball doesn't necessarily play as hard as it is. It was 97, 98 in this outing that we saw him. He was up to 100 at one point this year, but it's not. It doesn't seem to have that ride or that movement that you see from other guys in the system. He does have other pitches, and I think he will find a way to work his way through the system. I don't know if he'll eventually get to the big leagues or not, but it's a big fastball, and there's nothing wrong with having 98 in your back pocket.
It could be the case too, where I mean, when we saw Jason Foley at West Michigan, this was a while back, and I remember we were with James Shipman, how his fastball at that time was not having a lot of shape to it, but he had a couple other things to make him interesting. So Sanchez could be the case where it's just a matter of time too before his fastball takes a different kind of shape to it.
And they may have had him tone it down a little bit just to throw more strikes. It may have more natural movement. Maybe he's a natural two-seamer guy, and they had him throw four-seamers just to rein in his command, something like that. But yeah, the arm strength is certainly there, and he's, you don't see him really on prospect lists that much, but he's a name in the system worth knowing.
And number 4, a guy who, speaking of kind of unknowns, Thomas Bruss, who he came out of independent ball, and the Tigers have been doing this more, dipping in independent ball, finding some gems. Think of the outfielder that they signed,
Patrick Lee.
Patrick Lee was a prime example of this. And Bruss is a big dude, and he possesses a very big fastball.
Yeah, he's listed at 6'8", 280, and he throws really hard. His out pitch is a splitter. But it's set up by this fastball that's 96, 97. I think he got close to 99 this year. He's another guy that, he's 25 already and was in low A, and he struggled throwing strikes. He hit a bunch of guys, threw a bunch of wild pitches, but it's a really powerful arm. And if they can rein it in at all, he's a guy who's got the stuff to pitch in the back end of a big league bullpen. So he felt like he needed to be on the list.
Definitely got the size for it too. Just he kind of like reminds me of those mid-90 relievers with the long hair, like the.
Yeah, I mean, he's like 3 inches taller than Jason Foley. He makes Jason Foley look small. So, big dude, big arm, big stuff. Just needs to rein it in.
It's a matter of time, just getting some control. Number 5 is Marco Jimenez, who he, as you mentioned, Chris, and this was something that I totally forgot about, that he was starting at one point. He's not really a starter this year. But to see that ERA drop as much as it did, that's telling.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. I think the main issue was that he just didn't throw enough strikes as a starter, and so he would end up walking a bunch of people, and the innings would kind of snowball on him. Because you look at his, behind the curtain or whatever, and his FIP was about the same last year as it was in 2024, but his ERA was 5 runs lower. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a power arm. He doesn't miss a ton of bats either with any of his pitches, and so he's a guy that I don't think I would project to make the big leagues, but it is, like I said, this is about big fastballs, and he's a guy he's touched 100 before, lives in the upper 90s, and he's got a sinker and a four-seamer. I think the sinker's probably better, but again, a guy in the system worth knowing, because you never know, if somebody throws this hard, maybe it all works, comes together one day and he flies to the system. Yeah,
interesting too. Like kind of a little slight pause before he comes down, throw the ball, and it's like the rear and back part of it. But just interesting, almost like I don't know, it looks like it's crossarm, but just releases it funky.
Yeah, and this video is from 2020, I think 2019, maybe. It's I kept looking and looking. I thought we had some video of him somewhere, and I'm pretty sure I did on Twitter somewhere, but the Twitter search function not so good. So.
Yeah, we had some video of him at West Michigan. That I know that like when we were out there live for that. So as far as the bonus category or honorable mentions before we get to the bonus category, Wilmer Flores, Tanner Colip, Jake Miller, Freddie Pacheco, if he exists. We just joke about that. But RJ Pettit, who was Tiger minor league pitcher of the month in July, had a stretch in Erie where he didn't allow a run in over, I think it was like 20 innings of work or something to that effect. But he is also a right-hander who can get the fastball up to 96, 97.
Yeah, Pettit was probably the 6th guy on this list. His is more of I think it's a little bit more hittable just because of he's another big dude, and it's just kind of a downhill fastball that meets barrels at times. But he's developed his other pitches and throws hard, so I think there's some potential there. The other guys, like Wilmer Flores, were he healthy, he probably would have been much higher on the list, or wouldn't have been eligible because he would have been pitching in the big leagues last year. And it's been a real roller coaster for him for the last couple of years, and we'll see what happens. But I still thought he was worth mentioning because You know, in spring training, he was throwing upper 90s with movement with his fastball, and when he was throwing strikes, it was pretty nasty. So, and then Cole Hep has this ridiculous two-seamer with like 2,600 RPMs. Jake Miller's got it, his fastball and his sinker. They're both like 93, 94, tops at 95, but they've got great shape on him. He misses a ton of bats. And I wanted to put him as the fifth starter, but like then I have to explain again that he only made 3 starts, even though he pitched like 4 innings per outing, and I just didn't want to do that. But yeah, there's some more interesting fastballs in the system for sure. And like you said, Freddie Pacheco, who knows? He was
Yeah,
he's supposed to have a good fastball. We just haven't seen it.
yeah, outside of the time in St. Louis when he was with the Memphis Redbirds, but Miller he got off to a rough start in the Arizona Fall League and then just dominated, and that was just something that was a sight to see because you thought because he was down in Lakeland pretty much the whole time, and I think he spent maybe like a couple innings in West Michigan, but to go out in the Arizona Fall League and go out there and just dominate after it was the ERA was like after he got rocked first couple appearances, and then it was just like a different pitcher with that fastball.
Yeah, it's like I said, he's another. He and Gabriel Reyes, he's the guy that I said Gabriel Reyes is kind of similar to. Their fastballs they're both southpaws. Their fastballs seem to just kind of explode through the zone. They play better than their raw velocity. So it'll be really fascinating to see how they handle upper level pitching, upper level hitting, I should say.
So we move on to defense, and defense did a little differently because just based off the fact that the Tigers, it's hard to quantify defense to a certain extent. I mean, you can look at stats and look at error. I mean, you can look at simple things like how many errors somebody committed, but we've seen a lot of these guys up close and personal. So it was easy. The list was kind of, like I said, when I mentioned at the top of the podcast with Gage Workman going to the Cubs, and the system this year too, also with guys like the Tigers love playing multiple players in multiple positions. Trey Cruz comes to mind. Look at Austin Murr, who's on this list. So there's a lot of guys that how you lead, same thing, second base, third base. Andrew Navigado, he's also played multiple positions, but so in terms of I try to do this list as pure as possible and pure in the sense of just if they play the outfield 80 or 90% of the time, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting the way that the system has changed a little bit. There, 8-10 years ago, the Tigers always had a handful of guys who were basically not good at anything but defense. And I hate to be mean about that, but like a Cole Peterson, you remember him?
Oh yeah,
he was like an 80 grade shortstop, but had zero power. He could hit a little bit, but it was just not enough to make him a big leaguer. But they don't really have those guys anymore. Those sort of like defensive specialists, but they have a lot of guys who project to be average to above average to even plus on defense all around the diamond. And as you said, a lot of guys, they really value versatility now. So nobody's just playing shortstop every single day. And they're, I don't know. So it's a little bit harder to narrow it down, but I thought you did a pretty good job. And yeah, you see, like, I mean, one of the calling cards of this guy right here, Max Clark, right, was his defense. He was a 5-tool player potential. The only real question there was how much power he hit for, but there was no doubt about the glove and the arm and the speed. And that's borne out in pro ball so far.
Yeah, and I wish there was more footage of him in West Michigan. The fact that there was a couple times he made some really good diving catches, but West Michigan, as Dan Hasey can tell you, and has told us numerous times, it's a hard center field because it is very similar to the dimensions at Comerica Park. It's cavernous, and Clark reminded me of when we saw Riley Green there, where you kind of saw him like kind of playing. He played it perfectly. He played it pretty naturally, and I think that the quick adaptation for a kid out of high school to the pro level, playing outfield like that is pretty. It should open a lot of eyes.
Yeah, and to me, it was more, I don't know, closer to Parker Meadows defense. In what I mean by that is that he's a guy, he's more likely to run down a ball in the gaps than Riley Green was making diving plays, and that's why we don't have the highlights, right? Like diving catches are spectacular, and you pull them out, and we have you go back, we have games where Riley Green made like 2 diving catches in one game. It's because he didn't have the speed. He had the instincts, but he wasn't as fast as Clark or as Meadows. So whereas they're just kind of running down the play and making it look rather routine, Green had to dive, and it made it look more spectacular. But at the same time, I think Clark is probably a better defender at this age than Green was. It just like you said, the highlights aren't there because he's not having to make those crazy catches.
Yeah, he just does a lot of the fun. I hate saying that word sometimes. Like just does the basic fundamentals, but it's true. And Clark has been the ability to see the ball off the bat very well, enough to read it, and you can see it how he plays, how he shades over and everything like that. But also the arm strength too. He's got good arm strength in center field.
Yeah, for sure. And so do number 2 or the other 2 guys, right? You had in
Yeah.
the outfield.
Yeah. So Brett Callahan. The thing about Brett Callahan is that it just, I don't want to say sneak. I hate saying like he snuck out of nowhere, but he did in a way. He did. I mean, there's no in a way. I'm not saying that in a way. He just did, because the ability to go out, especially with Kevin McGonigal in that lineup, you have Max Clark, and Brett Callahan made some waves down in Lakeland. But this throw right here was one of my favorite of the year. Just
runner at third with 1 out. Mittens 2-1 home.
Let's set this up here. Check this out. Where he's at in left field.
That's a pretty deep throw, and
right on the money. Oof.
And it's almost like it picked up speed in the air somehow, because it was like there's no way he's going to get that, and it was just a seed. And that's the thing, like he's got that arm strength. He's fast enough to play center. He's kind of played the corners in deference to Clark and Patrick Lee some, but I think he's a pretty well-rounded defensive outfielder.
Yeah, even the way that looked off his hand when he threw it, it looked like just gonna loop, and then somehow it was like a laser beam. And the Tigers, in terms of like outfield arms in left, I don't want to say it's been a while, but they don't really. I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think of like recent examples of that from the system, and I'm drawing a blank. It's sort of guys who can have the ability to get assists.
Yeah, I mean, from the system, I don't even know. They've mostly had guys who can't throw, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You could think back to actual Tigers like Craig Monroe,
Bobby Higginson.
Bobby Higgins had a big arm. Yeah, they had some guys who could throw, but Callahan could throw. So can Patrick Lee. It's odd, you might go to 6 games in 1 week and not see an outfielder uncork max effort throw, and I think we saw Patrick Lee do it like a handful of times in like 3 games, and it's a strong, accurate arm, and he's another guy with above average speed who can play center field. So it's again another really nice defensive package.
So another guy too that comes to mind in terms of defense is Brady Allen, who after he came over from Florida in that trade, or excuse me, Miami, I'm sorry, he came over from Miami. He took over center field when Roberto Campos was having problems, and Campos has come a long way. He's still got some ways to go, but he really was kind of kept West Michigan intact a little bit before he got called up to Erie. His defense was that good in center field. And he's a guy who makes the sure throw, and provides along with him and Austin Murr. I almost put Austin Murr in right field with this list, but I put him more as an infielder. We'll get to that in a second as an honorable mention, because he did a good job filling in. But also honorable mentions: Jackson Strong, Trey Cruz, and Chris Myers. Chris Myers made 2 diving catches in the championship series. This guy's athletic enough. Remember, at the University of Toledo, he did play shortstop.
Mm-hmm.
So the athleticism was there, but he never played outfield and moved out the outfield because of the injuries to the Seawolves, and looked really good. Looked like a natural out there.
Yeah, he's a very solid outfield corner defender. Another guy with a solid arm. He's also a very good defender at first base. So, like you said, he's more athletic than you might guess based on that. And the other guys, Trey Cruz, we thought he took to center field really well, very quickly, which doesn't surprise given his family history. But he went back to playing a lot of shortstop this year before he got injured, and he looked much better there too. So another very gifted defender all over the place.
Yeah, and Gabe Alvarez has stated how valuable Cruz was in the outfield before, and I think he went in the infield based off injury issues that the Seawolves had. So speaking of the infield, let's go to Hyu Lee, and Hyu Lee. One of the things about Hyu Lee is that for his size, I think people kind of overlook him a little bit, but he plays that very athletically. Well, there's the Chris Myers catch there. That was oops, I was meant to put the Lee there. But as far that's just giving an example of Chris Myers' athletic ability. But Hiley, when I saw his first start at third, it was just the arm strength was there. It was just the accuracy. Just it was kind of wild throws. But there was a couple times where you saw him go from second base almost to the center field grass, just the outskirts of the center field grass to make a catch. He has a very good ability to have close it in and make good catches and makes the sure throws. Third base, I have to see him a little bit more, but I mean, outside of, I mean, left to right range, like his range was fine. It's just the arm was just kind of like, he didn't have to do any double pumps or anything. It was just kind of a matter of accuracy with him.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got everything you need to be at least an average defender at second base, as you said, and it would just make sense for the organization for him to play third base more. We've seen the arm strength, but as you said, it's the accuracy can get a little wild on him. I don't know if it's a footwork thing, if it's the way the ball comes off his hand, but I think it would make sense if they play him regularly at third base this year, just to see if he can do it. Because if he can, that's a pretty huge asset for the team. But yeah, solid defender up the middle.
Yeah, and we've talked about that too, like a little bit. Scott, when I had a chance to talk to Scott Harris at the end of the season presser, briefly, we did talk about Hiley's defense, and he's like, he doesn't think he gets enough credit on that, and rightfully so. He works a lot at it. Same thing with Kevin McGonigal, who we have here kicking off our infield, and McGonigal, or the second player mentioned in the infield, speed, but it's just like he's just such a gamer. It's just like just everything about Kevin McGonigal. Just you think about like that prototypical baseball guy, the guy that just is just working till out in this game till 10 o'clock at night with the lights on, just kind of stereotypes, but just his ability to. It's not just the fact that he can turn the double play, but he also can play shortstop and show good range there as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have a guy who, like, there's zero doubt that he can play second base probably at an above average level going forward. And the only real question is, can he stick at shortstop? And he showed a lot of what it takes. He's got a really good kind of internal clock, right? He might not have the strongest arm, but he knows when he needs to ramp up the throws, when he has to get rid of them quicker. He's got good agility. He's got really good hands. Now, we went and saw him at his when he started at West Michigan, and it was kind of obvious that he was pressing a little bit, and he made a couple errors at shortstop early, like his first few games, but he cleaned it up after that, and he was fine. And I would put it probably less than 25% chance that he sticks at shortstop at the big league level, but I'm sure he's a guy who could fill in there occasionally if you need to. And everything else is there. Like I said, the glove, the hand, the instincts, it's all great.
And speaking of instincts too, the next guy up is Trey Sweeney, who again, when he came over from the Dodgers, it was a solid profile. It was nothing that, it was just saying he makes the sure plays, has good range. But then, I mean, when he came up from Toledo, this is why the Tigers perhaps called him up as quicker than we expected. Because remember, Harris said he wasn't going to come up, and then he must have made more of an impression defensively than we figured. And this is one of the catches of the year. I mean, look at Riley Green's face. Every time I see his face, like cringe, like, oh my, but he was able to bounce back, and he was really, it provided the Tigers stability towards the last month of the season. And hitting wise, maybe it might take a minute to figure that out, but defensively, he looked solid.
Yeah, and I wrote up a scouting report for him after they acquired him, and I thought he was an average defender with an above average arm. And then you get to the big leagues, and his arm doesn't grade out very well, but everything else did. And that's the trouble with scouting based on just limited looks. But yeah, we talked about it during the season, is that he's a guy that appeared to learn from his mistakes at the big league level, didn't seem to make mistakes more than once. And I mean, that catch right there was the result of a ball he let drop a few games before that. He was like, I'm not going to let that happen again. And yeah, again, the arm strength isn't necessarily jumping off the page, but he's another guy that seems to have the instincts and the knowledge of how to position himself and where to get his arm angle and throw from odd platforms. And yeah, like, I think the Tigers did a really good job there getting a guy who could play shortstop at the big league level. That's not that easy to come by, and he can do it. So that's he definitely deserved to be on the list.
Honorable mentions. So Trey Cruz mentioned Austin Murr, who did a really good job of filling in at first base after Jake Holton, who also we have on the list, went down to broken wrist. Jim Jarvis, John Peck, and from your
Gilbert Montilla.
Montilla. Based off the fact that, I mean, there's a couple plays where he looked like he was making like, I don't want to say a hot dog play, but like sliding across the place, but has very good range for his size. And he pretty much forced the issue of, I think he looks better. Dare I say, he looked better than Christian Santana out there.
Oh yeah. I think, Santana, unfortunately, I don't know. We don't even get into that. But yeah, no, Montilla looks like a legit shortstop to me. He may end up sticking at second base just because of other people in the system, or even third base. But like you said, yeah, he's got a flair for making kind of the unorthodox play. I think we have a highlight of him, really catching a in between hop and whirling around and making the throw to first. He's and he doesn't make a lot of errors, or at least he didn't at lower levels. So he's pretty sure-handed, and he's got the ability to, I think, at least be an average defender at shortstop. So he's an exciting guy. John Peck is a guy that he kind of creeped into the honorable mention list on a lot of things, and he's got a lot of interesting data underneath. And I think he could play just about anywhere in the infield. He's an interesting player who I'd like to see get a full healthy year next year and see what he can do.
Yeah, he's a guy too that we saw him at Lansing, right?
I think so. He only played a handful of games in West Michigan, I think, before getting hurt.
I would have sworn that it was one of those guys we saw.
But yeah, he did. Yeah, he came up. He had a really hot streak actually in West Michigan. Now that I think about it, but I'm pretty sure we saw him. He and Callahan both made it up to West Michigan, but I think they both got hurt at some point and didn't really finish out the season there.
Well, here's an example. I did find an example of Framber playing, just showing his athleticism here. Check out the leaps on this here.
He's ready for the 3-1. Rip to second. What a catch!
Yeah, and that's him at second.
A trampoline in the air makes a sky-high grab to retire to Rip.
And then here's another one too, where this is the same, so
it's the extra run.
Actually lucked out, and Twitter actually for once was
the extra run.
Want to cooperate with us.
0-2 ground ball to second, backhanded by Montilla. Glove flips to short for one, to first. Oh, he got him.
Yeah, you can tell he's just comfortable out there. He's not afraid of doing doing a little bit of everything. So he's an exciting young player in the system.
Yeah, and I think this is hopefully he continues to grow this year, and if he can, the bat too. Like the bat started coming around a little bit towards the tail end of season in Lakeland. So, it was beautiful to see him come out for the playoffs. So, so the last player we wanted to mention, and I got a little flack for this a little bit on Twitter, not flack, but people were like wondering why I put Tyron Lorenzo as a catcher, as a defender. And I know that he struggles side to side. I know he's a work in progress, but here's why, folks. He's got an arm. He might end up being a first baseman. He might end up being a DH. I get it. That's fine. But as far as catchers go right now, Dingler's technically not a prospect anymore. And Briseño isn't really, I personally don't think he's going to be playing catcher anymore. I think he's going to be a first baseman. And I think there's some potential with Theron that I think allows him that he can potentially be at least 40, 50, 60 games back there. He might, I don't know, like I'm not going to write him off already. He's only 21, 22, something like that.
21.
Yeah. So I don't want to write him off that he's going to be a future, just a first base. He might be a first baseman DH, but we have Briseño there too. You got to play position. And so why not stick at catcher? I think he's come a long way, and I know he's working on it still, but I think there's his framing, I think it's gotten better. It got better as the Arizona Fall League went along. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I still think he could catch.
No, I agree with you. I think he probably tops out as maybe an average or fringe average defender, but like you said, the catch and throw skills are real. That's a plus arm with good accuracy. And there's nothing when you watch him, there's nothing that says, oh, this guy can't catch. He could stand, like you said, he could stand to be a little bit more agile behind the plate, and he needs to refine the finer points of catching, as you said, framing, calling at games and stuff like that. But the Tigers challenged him. They sent him out there to catch. He didn't. I don't know. He may have. I think he was DH in the All-Star game or whatever, and he may have done that a little bit. But they sent him out there to catch a bunch of different arms with different shapes, and he went and he did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
And I think that's only good experience. And we talked before, Double A is a big step for these catchers, but he's a guy that I think, I don't know, if he wants to catch, I think he can. And like I said, I don't think it's a terribly high ceiling as a defender, but with the thump in his bat from both sides of the plate and his eye, if he can be an average catcher or even, like I said, fringe average catcher, he's going to be tremendously valuable. And I think, and it's just one of those things in the system right now, like you said, Dingler doesn't technically qualify anymore. There aren't any other standout defenders behind the plate. They have guys who are solid. Eliezer Alfonso's solid. What's his name? Bennett Lee is solid. But, Liam Hicks is gone. Josh Crouch is gone. Julio Rodriguez is okay. They don't really have a ton of depth there behind the plate right now. We haven't seen Brady Serkonik play because he's been injured. So, Lorenzo's kind of it right now.
I mean, Steven Scott technically doesn't count as a prospect either. Right now he's the number one catcher at Toledo heading into the season.
I think he's going to be 28 next year.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes catchers develop super late, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Nothing about his defense stuck out to me, really.
Yeah, same here. And he's a guy who also started playing first base more of a necessity when the Tigers needed him to. So I don't know. Like, it's just, is it a reflection of the? I mean, I'm glad that the Tigers were able to get him. And I still think they're going to continue to look for catching upgrades, whether smaller or bigger. And it's so important. Look at what the Cubs today paid for Carson Kelly.
Yeah, a couple of years deal there. So
yeah. So the having the ability. I mean, you look at Rogers and Dingler, your number one. I mean, you can live with the high strikeouts with Dingler because he is such a good defender. And but then if Iran can do both and hit. Well, shoot. I mean, Tigers haven't had a really offensive-minded catcher since Alex Avila, technically. So,
yeah.
If you want to go back that far. I mean, if you want to go back even further. Anyway. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you for tuning in. And also, by the way, I forgot to mention, Emily Walden did a really good piece on our site you can find on our Tiger Minor League Report website. So, before we get out of here, I want to say that probably within the next week or so, we're going to have an announcement of sorts as we're sorting through a couple. There's I've been hinting at this, but there's going to be some changes, and it's all good changes. Just the way content is going to be delivered for all the bonus stuff and what have you. There's going to be more of it. I know I've been talking about this on trying to get some more stuff on Patreon, but we're working on some cool things in the future. I think 2025, I can tell you this much. We will be at spring training. We will be at more games. There will be the ability to, and also major league games as well. It's not just minor league game stuff too as well, but some big changes on the horizon. All good time. We'll talk about that. But for now, thank you for watching. If you want to check out any of our player interviews, those are as well. And hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll get some more players before the end of the year. And I think we should, are we going to do a cliche best of 2024 thing?
For games or for just in general? I don't know. We could.
Yeah,
I haven't actually thought about it.
Yeah.
We've got a couple more pieces to do. We need breaking ball. We need off speed, and we need command. And I think we're done.
Yeah. So and also we're probably going to reevaluate our top 32. That's also, that's going to be the Baseball America that just did their top 10 Tiger prospects. And so the system's changing quite a bit. We were thinking that there was going to be some sort of trade or something along those lines that would cause some sort of change, but so far, you know what's going to happen? You know what's going to happen, Chris? Immediately we change the top 31.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe we could get that up by Christmas.
Yeah.
It'll for everybody.
Yeah, it'll be a good Christmas present. So go to our website, TigersMLReport.com. Go check us out on Redbubble. If you're looking for gear, you can get your gear, Tiger Minor League Report gear, before the end of Christmas, if you order by December 17th. So if you're watching this on anytime before this, so timestamp wise, get your butt out there. And anything that we get off the store goes to back to the website. Have a good night, folks.